Welcome to Cynthia Chats. What do you need? Most of us would say that we need to be loved and appreciated and even feel secure. But that's pretty hard to achieve in the chaos of our world. Just given our own emotions and the way they fluctuate makes it difficult. But then we live in a world that is full of sin too. And if we try to get our relatives and our friends to make us feel loved, we can actually crush them and push them away. I recommend seeking after God. Today I have Sandra Byrd, and she is an author who has written a number of books, and her latest one is a devotional called Experiencing God's Love. Welcome, Sandra.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Sandra, can you explain what you mean by experiencing God's love?
I can. When I started thinking about the people to whom I'm the closest, that I feel the most intimate with and comfortable with, they're the people that I interact with in my day-to-day lives. I sweat with them. We're working together on projects. We laugh together. We cry. We're honest. We cook together. We tell jokes together. And that shared life is what builds the intimacy. And I started thinking about how I might experience that more with the Lord, how all of us might experience that more with the Lord. Because as you mentioned before, He's the one person who's always with us, who's always dependable. He promises us in Isaiah 41:10, He says, "So don't fear because I'm with you." So to experience something is to encounter it, to explore it with our five senses and our God-given spiritual senses, to join Him in His work, to invite Him into our work, and to walk with Him through the day, as Deuteronomy encourages us to do. Not a set-off thing in a corner of 30 minutes, but in the car, cooking, crying, rejoicing, whatever it might be.
You mentioned spiritual practices. What do you mean by that?
You know, it's funny. It came to me when I was thinking about playing the piano. So everybody who's practiced a sport or an instrument knows you have to sit down and do the drills, or you have to do the scales. And doing those scales over and over and those drills is what builds muscle memory for us. One favorite quote I have is from Malcolm Gladwell, who in his book Outlier says, "Practice isn't the thing that we do once we're good. Practice is the thing that we do that makes us good." And I would say that is the truth for believers too. Spiritual practices aren't something we do once we're strong believers, although hopefully we'll continue it. They're the things we do that help us be strong believers. Praying when you don't feel like it, memorizing scripture even though it might feel repetitive or boring, having faith even when the situation doesn't look good. Those are spiritual practices. And if we practice them like we do drills, when the crisis comes up, when a difficult situation comes up, our spiritual muscle memory will kick in and take over and help guide us through a period of fear.
The Apostle Paul mentioned that God's love was beyond understanding, and that makes me wonder how that all fits together with what you're saying.
I know, I've thought about that too. And I think, Scripture speaks to us about seeing through a glass darkly. So in other words, if you've looked through a looking glass or a thick drinking glass, we can see the form of what's there, but we can't see everything in its clarity. Although Paul promises later we'll see as if face to face, everything will be clear. And I think God's love is like that too. We can understand a portion of it. We can understand a piece of it, but because it's so much bigger, deeper, wider, longer, Scripture tells us, than anything else we can imagine, it's hard for us to understand it fully. But as we experience God, just like as we experience intimacy with people, we will begin to understand more about Him, and we will begin to experience Him more deeply. The book is based on Ephesians 3:19, which is that may we experience the love of Christ, though it's too great to understand fully, meaning we can partially, and then we will be made complete eventually with all the fullness of life and power that comes from God. I know when I do those practices, I know when I cultivate intimacy with Him, I begin to understand more fully how much He really does love me.
Well, I appreciate that wisdom, because that's very true. The more we spend with God, the more time we spend with God, the more difference it makes in our lives. I appreciate your wisdom, and I appreciate you sharing with us today. Thanks.
Thank you.